that's essentially what the mandala is about. It's a visual tool. This is actually what it symbolizes. And then beyond that, there are many, many, many layers of symbolism and meaning. So to the extent that you can study about the mandala or a long explanation. This is Losang Samten. He's actually a Tibetan person, and he's also a Tibetan Buddhist monk. He was born in Tibet in 1952, and in 1959, when he was about 6 years old, he, his little sister, and his mother and father had to escape from Tibet over the Himalayan mountains through Nepal and into India because of the Communist Chinese invasion and conquering policy of Tibet. So in 1959, he and his family escaped, and he went to school, and then until the age of like 14 or so, in Kalimpong, studying at school, and then he came to Dharamsala, where his mother was living, and he actually entered a drama school in Dharamsala for 3 years, and later, after that point, at the age of 17, he decided he wanted to really go deeper into the Buddhist studies and practice. So he became a monk at Namgyal Monastery. Namgyal Monastery is the monastery that's closely associated with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and also the Tibetan government. So in Dharamsala is where the Tibetan government has reestablished operations in exile. So all of them are actually refugees. So in 1959, about 100,000 Tibetan refugees were able to escape over the Himalayan mountains and make it outside of Tibet. So he became a monk at the age of 17, and he studied for about 18 years in the monastery itself. And in the monastery, he studied writing, reading, calligraphy, different forms of ritual art, music, dance, including the process of making sand mandala paintings. Mandala is actually a Sanskrit word meaning a round symbol. In Tibetan, it refers to the term kilipur, and that means a central point in the middle of a circle, which is occupied by the main form of the Buddha. And in this case, it's depicted by the blue vajra. The vajra is a ritual tool in the very center. And it means a point in the middle of a circle surrounded by an environment. And in this case, the environment is the divine palace. The mandala, in this case, is definitely a round symbol, but it symbolizes a three-dimensional structure. This is only a two-dimensional painting. It's like a blueprint. What this actually is a divine environment, a divine palace. And if you actually go to India, Tibet, Nepal, Southeast Asia, you can find many temples, monasteries, and stupas, Buddhist reliquary sites, that are constructed in the shape of a mandala. And so in this case, to make the mandala, we actually have to find a very good place, a quiet and clean place, and to build this structure, which is called temple. And then once the structure is completed, then you begin with the actual painting of the sand mandala. Sand mandalas sand paintings have been made for over 3,000 years. But in the 6th century BC, during the time of Shakyamuni Buddha himself, he actually taught the meaning, the purpose, the techniques, and the method, and the symbolism for Buddhist sand mandala paintings. So from that time on to the present, the whole tradition has been taught from teacher to student, teacher to student, teacher to student. Right now, 22,500 years later, down to the present. So it's very fortunate that we have someone who actually knows this whole tradition. Then the mandala itself, once we have this structure, what we do is we actually make what are called the architectural lines. These are the last two lines that we can see now. The rest of it covered up. We actually determine the very center of the structure. This is actually 6 by 6 feet. The mandala itself is only 4 feet wide, 4 feet in diameter. The architectural lines, like any architectural lines for a room like this, or a house, or a garage, anything, you establish the beams, the pillars, the different floors, the gates of entry. So once those lines are made, then you actually collect the sand and you make the sand. So we actually, the sand is from India itself. We cleaned it, we ground it up to make it very fine, and then we actually added different watercolor pigments. There are countless kinds of mandalas that can be made. In this particular one, called the Guya Samaja mandala, we're using, you can see over there, 14 or 15 different colors. Each mandala system is unique to itself. They use different architectural lines, different symbolism, different colors, different designs, and different reasons for making them. They depict different aspects of the fully awakened mind, or the Buddha's mind. So in this case, this one is called the Guya Samaja mandala. The Guya Samaja is one form of the awakened mind, or the Buddha's mind. And in this case, it's believed that from the very center of the heart of the Buddha, the whole mandala emanates out. So so that the whole mandala is visualized or imagined to be in the nature of clear light. So in this case, once the sand is prepared, and we do a short ceremony to invoke the blessing into the different colors of sand. You actually begin at the very middle of the mandala, make the first figure in the center, and then the whole painting emerges out from the center. In the same way that the whole thing is an emanation from the heart of the Buddha's mind. So when it's completely done, it'll come to this outer white line. And what has been completed so far, and you can tell, is the house itself, the green lotus flower that the house is sitting on, and what Losang Samten is working on now are the petals of the lotus flower, the ring of lotus flower petals. There are 14 different colors, but the main 5 colors in this painting are blue in the center, white in the eastern direction, because the Guhyasamaja Buddha is actually is seated on this lotus flower in the center, facing the eastern direction. So there's blue, white in the east, yellow in the south, red in the west, and green in the north. These 5 colors refer to the 4 directions in the center. They also refer to 5 Buddha lineages, and they also refer to 5 elements, basic elements of earth, wind, water, fire, and space. Every single design, color, shape, dimension in this is not something that's individually created. It's exactly prescribed and described in the texts that explain the whole system of making a mandala. The texts were initially written down in Sanskrit, and between the 8th to the 10th century, Indian and Tibetan Buddhist masters actually did a great effort to translate all of the Buddha's teaching from Sanskrit into Tibetan, where it has continued in unbroken lineage until 1959, when the Communist Chinese began the systematic destruction of Tibetan culture and religion. But so the mandala itself every single part has a specific meaning and relates in general to some aspect of the mind. Also it relates to a transformed environment, not the worldly or mundane environment we live in, but the environment of a being who is fully awakened. The 5 colors, the 5 basic colors, also refer to the 5 Buddha lineages. These 5 Buddha lineages refer to 5 personality types, where one mental affliction is dominant, is more dominant than any of the others. And in our own experience, we can tell that there are countless mental afflictions or disturbing emotions. But from the Buddhist view specifically, if you abbreviate that down to 5, there is anger, ignorance, attachment, greed, and jealousy. These 5 Buddha lineages actually teach the techniques, symbolize the techniques and the methods to overcome these disturbing emotions. So the deeper that you can study the symbolism and the many levels of symbolism, the more powerful the mandala is. So that in this case, in the Guhyasamaja, there are 32 different emanations of the Buddha, of Guhyasamaja Buddha. There's a picture on the table of what's called the Kala Chakra mandala. It's called the Wheel of Time mandala. And Losang Samten made that last summer in the Museum of Natural History. And we had about 50,000 people come through to see it. And that is actually considered one of the most difficult sand mandalas to make, because it has 722 different deities, emanations depicted. This one only has 32. And the 32 should not be understood as specific Buddhas. They're actually all emanating in all parts of the same mind of one Buddha in the center. So just briefly to give you an idea of the symbolism, I hope everyone can see. I'm blocking this. The main part of the house actually consists of 3 levels. The first level is this round part in the center. It actually has 9 rooms. There's Guhyasamaja Buddha in the very center, sitting in the middle of an 8-petaled lotus flower. And he is depicted as this blue vajra. A vajra is an instrument that symbolizes strength, stability, and also great compassion. Right next to the vajra itself, there are these white and red scarves coming out, and that represents the consort, or the male and the female principle in union together. The sand mandala is actually a part of the tantric level of Buddhist practice. And in Tantra there are 4 levels, but the sand mandala system is something that's used only on the highest level. It's actually used by a teacher, a highly qualified teacher, to introduce students who are very well prepared to a system of meditation. The mandala itself is studied, examined, and memorized, and the image itself is actually memorized in the mind and is used as a meditational tool. But specifically, then,
the male and female principle are not actually a male and a female copulating, which is a great mistake that has happened in many texts. Many historians, many scholars have made that mistake. What it actually refers to is one being who is united in the fact that it has developed the male and the female principle in one mind, indivisibly, in union. The male principle of great compassion and the female principle of sublime wisdom, united in one being. That's actually the goal of tantric level of Buddhist practice. And specifically, tantric level was developed and taught only for a few people because it's a very powerful tool that works with very subtle and powerful techniques for transforming negativity into positive qualities. Then continuing on just briefly, there are the 5 Buddha families, and there's not room enough to make the whole body, so they're depicted by what they're holding in their right palm. So in the center, there's Guya Samaja, who has a Vajra. In the eastern direction, there's the white wheel that represents the Buddha Vairochana. In the south, yellow, there's the Buddha Ratnasambhava, who's holding these jewels. In the west, there's the red color, and that's the Buddha Amitabha, who's holding a red lotus flower. In the north, the green, there's the Buddha holding the sword, and that's Amoghasiddhi. So these are the 5 main Buddha lineages. Every single mandala will at least depict these 5 main Buddha families. Besides that, every single mandala actually has different designs, different symbolism, different meaning, different purposes. And in each of the corners are a symbol that represents the female aspect of the Buddha's mind, of the fully awakened mind, represented by an eye, a blue vajra, a red lotus flower, and a blue lotus flower. So those are the 9 rooms in the center. And then there are 2 spheres circling that. There are 2 wheels circling that. There's the blue sphere with yellow vajras. And this is actually can be visualized or imagined in 2 different ways. Either as 2 steps coming up to the center part of the mandala, or it can actually be visualized as a sphere encircling it. So that the blue with the orange or the yellow vajras depicts strength and protection and protects the center. The next set is this sphere of clear light, which consists of the green, yellow, red, blue, and red. And that actually, again, is visualized as a sphere of protection. Then the next level, level 2, consists of this next square, the blue. And that holds what are called the 5 sense offerings. The offerings of the 5 senses of a human being. A begging bowl with food, which represents taste. A mirror, which represents form. A guitar represents sound. A white conch shell with ambrosia, which represents smell. And these beautiful scarves, which represent silk clothing for the sense of touch. These are the 5 sense offerings that are offered to the main Buddha in the center, Guya Samaja. That's the second level. Then the third level is this outer part here. And in the third level, there are 8 bodhisattvas and 10 wrathful protectors. There are 8 bodhisattvas, 2 in each direction. There are 2 wheels here, 2 jewels, 2 lotus flowers, and 2 swords. The bodhisattva is actually a being, is a Sanskrit word, meaning a being who has developed from a very deep place in his or her mind the complete and utter wish to reach full awakening, full enlightenment in order to be of benefit to all other sentient beings. So that the deepest motivation is that because of the kindness of others, I am going to clarify and purify my mind to the highest degree so that I can facilitate and support the happiness of others. That's what a bodhisattva means. It's a highly developed being. Then there are 8 of those. And then there are what are called 10 wrathful protectors. All of these again are emanations of the same mind, the Guya Samaja in the center. There's 1 in each corner, a sword, a coiled rope, a sword, and a sword. And there's 1 in each doorway. There's an axe, a club, a pink lotus flower, and what's called a double dorje, or a double vajra here. That's 8. And then this one here, a black hat, depicts the wrathful protector, the protector form of the Buddha, who's situated above the mandala. And over here, there's again a coiled rope, and that represents the wrathful protector below the mandala. Because we have to remember again, this is a 2-dimensional blueprint of a 3-dimensional structure. So those are the 10, and those 10 wrathful protectors protect from negative forces coming in through the 10 directions. The 4 cardinal directions, the 4 diagonals, above and below. Those actually are the 32 different emanations or deities. Then from here out, there's this wall. It's made of blue, green, red, yellow, and white. And that's actually the wall that actually delineates the size of the house. And from here outwards, the sand mandala painting has been flattened out for the purpose of making it 2-dimensional. But if we were to actually see a 3-dimensional picture, and we have some on the table over there, this whole area is raised up. It's actually raised up. But for the painting, the 2-dimensional form, we flatten it down so people can see. So these are right here is decoration on the outer wall. There's this red part with these beautiful, what are called dakinis. Dakinis are the female aspect of the Buddha's wisdom. And here they're depicted as little beings with beautiful silk scarves, rainbow-colored pants, and bare-chested. And what they are, they actually depict the Buddha's complete and fully developed wisdom. And in this case, they're also serving as offering goddesses, making offerings to all of these emanations of the Buddha inside. And then there's a beam with the blue and green and yellow jewels. This kind of drapery of jewels, this cloth hanging that's blue and has this white design, and then the outer part, which is the lotus petal beams. And if you look, that's what these are here on the outside. These are the lotus petal beams that are on the top of the wall. So that's actually and then there are the 4 gates, or the 4 doors. Each doorway has what's called 2 of the 8 auspicious symbols. These 8 auspicious symbols are actually just signs that relate to different parts of Buddhist thought, but also whenever a high teacher comes, you actually, in chalk on the floor, make out a design of these 8 auspicious symbols. And in this case, there are 2 in each doorway. Here, there are the yellow banner of victory and the 2 golden fish. Here, there's a pink lotus flower and a vase. In the western direction, there's a white conch shell and a blue knot of infinity, an infinite knot. And in this direction, the green direction, there is a white wheel and this is the umbrella. That's the umbrella, and that's the yellow banner of victory, a banner that rises. So these 8 symbols are offered whenever a high teacher comes as a sign of auspiciousness, of welcome, of good luck. Then at the top of each of these gates, you can see in any of the directions, there's a golden wheel, the wheel which represents the Buddha's turning of the wheels of the teaching. It said that he gave 3 great turnings of the wheel, which means 3 great teachings. And in fact, in his life, he actually made many, many, many teachings. But the 2 deer on either side of this golden wheel represent the place called Deer Park, which is where the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, gave the first teaching, or the first sermon of his advice to the world. Then out here in the green area, these are actually things that are depicted on the roof. And if you look at the picture, you can actually see in the 3-dimensional model. But we have vases that are made out of wish-fulfilling wood, emanations of the mind in the form of a practitioner meditating on the whole mandala itself, clouds with a string of jewels, a white umbrella at each corner of the house, and these beautiful jeweled ornaments right here. So that's actually the main body of the painting, and then outside, and then, well, actually to give you a sense of the visualization, because when a student is introduced to this system of meditation, you actually have to learn how the whole mandala is constructed. This actually consists of, out here, these 2 outer levels here are the same as these inner 2 here. There's a sphere of dorjes or vajras, which is a sphere of protection, and outside of it, the last level is the sphere of clear light. And in the sphere of clear light, the red and the yellow refer to flames of fire, the green and the blue refer to clouds. And all of this is visualized as a sphere encasing a green lotus flower, above which there is this house, this divine palace or environment of a fully awakened mind. And essentially, the challenge here is, on a number of levels, to identify the disturbing emotions that keep us being limited beings. Anger, ignorance, attachment, jealousy and greed being the 5 main enemies. The real enemy is not the outside. The real enemy are these disturbing emotions that destroy our happiness and destroy the happiness of the people who we interact with. So the challenge is, the mandala is actually challenging you to identify those disturbing emotions, learn the techniques to uproot them from the very source, and then enter into the mandala as a fully awakened being. And when you actually enter into the mandala, you start from the eastern direction, and you enter through the door, and you actually travel and interact with each of these deities, each of these forms of the Buddha's mind. 32 of them in this case. In some other mandalas, 722, 64, 16, depends. And you actually receive a special type of instruction about one aspect of the mind from each of these forms. And by the time that you've received this instruction and done the practice, you have everything that you need to do to transform your mind from a mundane, limited sense of who we are to actually becoming a fully awakened being, a Buddha or an enlightened being. And I wanted to mention also something about where this is all coming from, because it started in the 6th century BC, maintained in India until the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries, when Indian Buddhism was actually destroyed in India itself by invasions of Mongols and Turks, etc. Fortunately, prior to that time, it was saved in many different countries, but specifically the practice of sand mandalas was preserved from somewhere from the 8th, 10th century on to the present. But now, in 1959, following 1959, during the Cultural Revolution, from the mid-60s to the late 70s, not only Tibet, but all of China suffered greatly because of the Cultural Revolution. And during that time, countless monasteries, books, people, institutions were all destroyed all over mainland China, as well as in the Tibetan country. But specifically in Tibet, over 6,000 monasteries were destroyed. Unlike America, the monasteries are the pillar of society. If you had a child, a son or a daughter, that's where you would send your children to go get an education in reading, writing, arithmetic, basic philosophy, calligraphy, poetry, literature. Then, if they had a wish on their own to become a monk or a nun for the remainder of their life, that was their decision. But at least as a primary source of education, you would go to a monastery. Then, so 6,000 of the monasteries were destroyed, over 6,000. In addition, the Tibetan population is 6 million people, and of that population, from the mid-60s to the late 70s, 1.3 million people were systematically murdered. And even as we speak now, I should say that then from 1980 up until 86, 87, things looked like they were getting better. A little bit more leniency, a little bit more room for tourism, foreigners to come, journalists. But in the past 2 years, because the Tibetans have once again begun demanding their rights to practice their own faith, to teach their own language, to speak freely and have the right of assembly, the communist regime has once again clamped down. And newspapers have depicted some of the stories, but once again, there's a lot of problems that are occurring in Tibet itself right now as we speak. So that once again, Tibetan culture no longer really exists in Tibet. I was there in the summer of '87, and it's actually very sad because everywhere you go, you see that the monasteries and the whole tradition and almost all of the literature have been destroyed. Actually, 60% of the literature is said to have been destroyed. 6,000 monasteries, 1.3 million people. So the real Tibetan culture now exists in the refugee community, the communities that are in exile. Losang Samten is actually a product of that. From the age of 6 on, he's lived as a refugee in India. He was invited to come to America about a year ago. And now, because we have a very good opportunity, we're here now to make this sand mandala painting. So we're very fortunate not only to have a Tibetan person here, but also a monk. And not only a monk, but a person who knows how to make the mandala. And not only a person who knows how to make the mandala, but also a person who understands many of the levels of symbolism and meaning. So, briefly, that's it. But what I could say actually is that when this is done in the purpose of a ritual context, the mandala itself is made by a team of monks working together. Usually 8 or 12 monks working together, 2 or 3 in each direction. And it's constructed over 4 days. And the sand mandala painting is only one small element of a much larger ritual. And then once the ritual is given, the ritual being an initiation, giving permission to a student, and an introduction and permission to a student to do a meditative technique. Once that is given, the mandala is destroyed ritualistically. It's actually dismantled by taking a little bit of sand, from each of the emanations, in this case, this mandala system 32, and then sweeping up all the sand, putting it into a vase or an urn, and then bringing it to the nearest body of water. In this case, Losang Samten is working alone, and it will take about a month to complete the whole project. And it's not being done for a ritual, it's just being offered as a way of sharing part of Tibetan Buddhist culture, which is very near, which is in a historical, vulnerable situation right now. So that sometime in June or September, we will come back, and we will, from New York City, which is where we live, and we will do the ritual of dismantling the ceremony and bring it to the Schuylkill River. And the millions of grains of sand are considered to be empowered and blessed, so that every little grain of sand is then offered to the river to benefit the marine life, to purify the water, and to prevent, to dispel any injury and illness to human beings living in the area. Also, I should say, he made the Guya Samaja Buddha as opposed to any of the countless other forms of the enlightened mind, because the Guya Samaja Buddha is associated with the energy of creating a mind that is more receptive, more vast, more open, and specifically with the energy to study and to learn. And we thought that in Philadelphia, and specifically in this place, there's so many students, universities, colleges, high schools, that it would be an appropriate energy to invoke, because you see it. And it's considered, from the Buddhist point of view, that anyone who just sees the mandala itself has a seed planted in their heart. And that seed has to do with this energy of creating receptivity and openness. And whether that seed ripens quickly or slowly is dependent on each individual's causes and conditions. But the seed has already been planted in all of us already. So, with that, if you have any questions, or if you wish, I can translate for Losang Samten, if you have some specific questions.
The mandala always this size.
No, the mandala can be made larger or smaller depending on the space. So that the Kalachakra sand mandala, the picture over there, is actually 6 feet long. Yes, that was the Wheel of Time sand painting, and that was 6 feet wide. This one is just a little bit more than 4 feet in diameter.
The mandala that was created in New York recently, was that done ritualistically, or was that also just
That was
instead of something for you?
right. It was a latter. It was made by Losang Samten with 2 other monks, and that was to share as part of Tibetan Buddhist culture. And we should note that even amongst all the Tibetan community and many, many monks, there are very few people who have ever seen a mandala being made, because traditionally the whole process of creating the sand mandala was done in private by just a group of monks focusing their energies and keeping all disturbances and obstacles outside. So until last year, the one made last summer and this one, this is the first time that anyone has been allowed to see this in public. Dann mi kaže da ten kinko so je kao da tena tecan sometimes the cheap young No, there's no problem or no disturbances with that. At this point, it's very appropriate to share and to actually teach and share part of this culture.
Would a non-Tibetan Buddhist be allowed to learn this technique if they were at the appropriate level of
No,
learning?
maybe. Yes. But every day before beginning, Losang Samten actually sits and does about 15 minutes of prayers and meditation to establish, to generate the correct motivation for being involved in this project. It's very important to realize that this is not being done for one's own benefit, but that it should be done totally for the purpose of benefiting others. And the text itself, which describes every color, every form, dimension, symbol, meaning, visualization, as well as the motivation, is actually part of that is recited every morning. And Losang Samten has actually memorized that whole text, which takes about 3 hours to recite. And the whole image, every part of it, is actually already memorized in his mind. He's been doing this for about 16 years now, so he has a lot of experience. But he told me that in general it takes about 3 years to learn how to make the whole mandala. You have to read the text, learn the symbolism, receive the permission, work with the teacher, and actually see other people making the architectural lines, making the sand. And I've tried working on it. It's not easy. We can let other people try if you wish, but it does does take a certain amount of concentration. And I'd like to translate his name. Losang Samten. Losang actually means the good mind, and Samten means concentration. So it actually means the good mind of concentration. And that's the name that was given to him when he became ordained as a Buddhist monk. So,
Are there many young people learning this technique?
yeah, there are many. And not every monastery teaches this technique. But Namgyal Monastery in Dharamsala, India, almost all of the 170 or so monks are learning this technique because this is one of their responsibilities. It's actually they have to upkeep and uphold this tradition.
Are the texts in Tibetan or Sanskrit?
In Tibetan. And we have here. And if some aspect is forgotten, yes, you go back to the text. Otherwise, it's actually all memorized. And as he's sitting there, he remembers not only what color and how long, but what it means and what the form of this Buddha looks like, its need, its qualities. It's actually a meditation process when you're actually making it. So, how are the sands actually laid down? The sand? Yeah. The sand? The funnels. We have an extra pair of funnels here if somebody wants to try. And another sand mandala has been planned for Los Angeles, beginning July 6th at the Museum of Natural History in LA this summer. They're making the Kala Chakra mandala, and another mandala has been scheduled for Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Walker Arts Center. So it seems to be a very good way to really demonstrate one small part of Tibetan Buddhist culture. And many of the teachings are really contained within the mandala itself. And to the extent that you can study it and go deeper and deeper, you can actually learn more and more of the Buddha's teachings.
Has it always been done like that? Like he's doing? Has it always been done that way?
Using the iron funnels, the metal funnels. Nyamang yagan nang na chichame koto lakte subere or chaku vegetation. No. So maybe before the tradition came to Tibet itself, maybe the Indian Buddhist monks used their hands, but in Tibet they actually developed these funnels because using the funnels you can make much more beautiful detail and much more accurate. So from safe to say the 10th century on, they've been using the metal funnels.
Designing ever applied to textile in the same way, like a weaving project?
That's a Dan. Dan Sudir comes to remote Dinashin Sudir. And it's short to it. Dan, remote comes to against something remote action. Tanga Sudir. It's not, this design is not used, for example, in making carpets, but there are some very, very trained painters who actually make paintings, what they call pampas, painted scrolls, actually painted. But what I didn't mention is that mandalas can be made out of many different substances. They can be made out of gold, silver, bronze, wood, two-dimensionally and three-dimensionally. They can be made out of butter, sand, ground up flowers, ground up jewels, rice, barley. So there are many different substances, but the sand is considered the most efficacious because the sand is most difficult to work with and it requires that much more energy and concentration from the side of the artist. And for that reason, more blessing, more merit is created in this spot. And more detailed paintings can be made with using sand as opposed to wood, clay, earth, whatever. So in a few days it'll be done, hopefully, and our last day is a week from Sunday, May 7th. We hope you'll have a little party.
Will there be a ceremony at the end?
A week from Sunday, I don't think there's going to be. Yeah, maybe we'll do a short ritual on I think next Sunday, the very end.
and that would be
No, we will keep it. We've decided to keep it here. The museum has asked us to keep it here at least until June, maybe until September. And when we come back, and we don't have a date for that yet, but when we come back sometime in June or September, we will perform the dismantling ceremony, where you actually say prayers and do a ritual, sweep up the sand, and offer food.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
And that will be in
Right now, possibly the second week of June. But when we establish the date, then we'll definitely tell the museum, and we'll definitely inform all the newspapers, because that's something that is open to the public, and it's actually a very important ritual, because it takes like a month to construct this painting, and it takes 30 seconds to destroy. So you really begin to immediately sense non-attachment, impermanence, and art that is not just beautiful, but it also has a religious function. And when the function is complete, you destroy it and you let go. Excuse me? I should also say that we're videotaping and doing 16 millimeter footage, photographs, slides, etc. And that the whole process is being documented, and we're making a 20-minute educational film that will be here at the museum and at the university, and will be essentially open to being used as a teaching tool for whomever is interested. And as we go along, we're beginning to write up more information about the symbolism, different aspects, everything.
Are there any plans to do some kind of art book of these things? I don't know if you could sell it, it's beautiful.
Actually, a group in New York City called the Samaya Foundation is making like a coffee
Yeah.
table book on the Kala Chakra mandala. Yeah. I don't know when it's coming out.
Are there some mandala patterns and symbols known from before the historical Buddha?
Somebody mate kongo ki rimo soup yorbe yorma.
지나센 만들어 쟤네 데모 뒤에지 있기로 이 지나신 데모지
So prior to the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, 6th century, there definitely were sand paintings, but they were not specific in the system of mandalas in Buddhist practice. But actually at the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, he taught these specific forms, symbols, and techniques.
So prior to his time, they did not have surfacing purpose.
No. He actually took that kind of artistic form and really incorporated it into a certain aspect of tantric level of Buddhist practice, laden with many levels of meaning, meditational purposes, symbolism, healing. I mean, because thinking that this actually identifies with the root of our suffering, these disturbing emotions, and also the antidotes to overcome that. Like the Navajo Indian sand painting, this is also a tool for healing. Because in the Navajo tradition, they actually have many elements that are similar to the Tibetan sand painting. And a few months ago, Losang Samten actually went to New Mexico, and he just demonstrated the sand mandala painting for the Navajo Indians. They at that time were not prepared to show him their own tradition, but we were setting up some projects in the future. And there's similarities in the sense that there's emphasis on 4 directions, different colors, that it's used to heal people who have certain illnesses in the mind. And, but I don't know a whole lot about sand mandala painting, Navajo sand painting. But I'm sure that I will learn over the next few years.
Is there any similarity to the Aboriginal sand paintings?
Actually, there were just Aboriginal sand paintings made a couple of months ago in New York City. They're Aborigines who were brought from Australia. And they use a different system. They use a lot of sand, they do it with their hands, and they make it very, very large. But apparently, some of those sand paintings that they make are supposed to depict images that they see in their dreams. So that's something that's very different. And I don't think they have the emphasis on the 4 directions and the intricacy. It's much more of a large-scale production. But I haven't talked directly with these Aborigines. But it does show that in many different cultures and different times in history, the same phenomenon has occurred and is occurring. the use of sand and different materials for making spiritual art. I mean, that's definite in terms of the Aborigines, the Tibetans, American Indians, and probably many other cultures. In the same way that religions have appeared and grown as a means to bring happiness to people. That's the main emphasis by the different teachers. Different systems, different places, different symbolism, but the real purpose is actually to destroy suffering and to create happiness. What human beings do with that afterwards is problematic and our own responsibility. But the initial intent, I think is the same, definitely.
Thank you so much.
And also,
Wisdom U.S. Press.
yeah, you can get it. There's a picture of
That was the first place I was going to try and find what. Why was Philadelphia chosen?
Okay. Good luck.
See you Wednesday.
All right. I'll take your pen. You can buy a poster. We have posters for sale of money. Just dark painting on white, and that money goes to Mandala Monastery.
Thank you.